Good day, guys. Welcome to the channel of SA Accounting Network. In today's video, we're going to be talking about one of the hot topics at the moment in the tax world, and that we're going to be talking about the SARS non-resident tax status confirmation letters. I know that is a mouthful, and there's a lot to take in, and it's definitely something new. It's not something that's been around for a long time. As I mentioned before, with our tax consultant, we see ourselves as general practitioners where we know a little bit about everything, but we don't specialize in any specific areas. If I come across something and I'm not sure how it works or what to do, I'm going to call in a specialist, somebody that can help us with that specific issue. And that is the reason why we're sitting here today, is we're going to be talking about these new letters that SARS is starting with. So I think maybe this is an introduction. I've got Jerry Botha on the line, and I've got Thomas Lobban from Tax Consulting SA. And maybe if they can just introduce themselves quickly. Jerry, do you want to maybe introduce yourself quickly to the viewers?
Thank you, Andre. Thank you for having us. I'm Jerry Botha. I'm the managing partner of Tax Consulting. And we love complex tax areas, especially international tax. I think as I'm growing older, I'm not sure what I know anymore, just except for many scars on my back. And thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's lovely. Thank you, Jerry. It's lovely to have you. Thomas?
Thank you, Heinrich. I'm legal manager for cross-border taxation here at Tax Consulting, a lot less qualified than Jerry is. But I definitely share that passion with tax, and in particular international tax. It's good to be here today.
Yes. I think maybe just to start off, I think the first thing is we're going to start off with this long word, the SARS non-resident tax status confirmation letters. Why? Why do they start with all this nonsense now? If I moved out of the country 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and now all of a sudden I get this new requirement that I actually have to prove, do you guys maybe want to run us through a timeline? I know it's something that's been progressive, and I think that is one of the things that we as tax consultants also realized, that there were certain things you're working with a moving target, because today they say something else like this, tomorrow they say no, now they said an additional requirement. Can you maybe just talk us through the timeline of how this thing got to where it's now?
Yes, I think, Andre, that when we around in 2001, obviously we moved from a source and deemed source basis to residency basis of taxation. But there was quite a widely worded Section 10102, that 183 60-day rule, that just exempted all your remuneration for being outside South Africa. And that rule was kind of a bit of a mix between the US test, the Australian test, and the old UK sandwich test, if that makes sense. And that piece of legislation, I think it went through about 6 versions, that draft legislation, and I think the commentary specifically, it was for many South Africans working in the Middle East, that they work in a no-tax country, and they don't want them to pay tax here because it's good that they work outside and send money back.
Yes. And
obviously that policy change was a big surprise to us, because normally if government has a big change in policy, it should kind of announce the reason why it changes its policy, but it didn't. It just suddenly said to us, if you don't pay tax in another country, then you're going to pay tax in South Africa, or the exemption won't apply. And then we kind of fought that back in Parliament, all the way to the fact of this kind of 1.2 million exemption, which is very close to the kind of $108,000 exemption that applies to the US. Yeah. Now, I think that the moment that happened, suddenly, in the past, South Africans just left and never informed SARS. The fact that there was deemed capital gains tax or not it kind of was forgotten often, and a lot of the cases it's young professionals where they don't have anyway a lot of capital gains tax. If you've got a fixed property in South Africa and a car and an RA that pays out a bit of cash, you don't really have a CGT exit charge in any event at that stage. But obviously now compliance become a big issue, and we don't have great statistics of how big an issue it is. But if you look at the past 5 years budget speeches, every single year, how much focus there is on expats. This year, again, there's 3 specific areas that they speak specifically to expats. It's a very high weighting of legislative change towards expats. So that tells you there's a reason for that. And I think one of the things why I think this non-residency certificate is so important is we now know that common reporting standards work very well across the world. You know, the OECD has managed to get that right. And South African banks take it very seriously to report that information globally, and global banks take that information very seriously to report to countries where their clients are based. If you, for example, are a US passport holder and you go to a Swiss bank or a European bank, they'll simply say, thank you, we don't want you as our client, because the US compliance is so high on that individual, it's not worth him, no matter how rich he is. So we know that there's a lot of information being fed into SARS in terms of South Africans abroad having share portfolios, cash in bank, and all sorts of things. And then the question is, when they compare, I guess, that information that's fed in with a taxpayer profile on record, there's a massive mismatch there. Because this guy perhaps have never filed a return, because he left South Africa 20 years ago and did nothing. And those things starts resolving itself. And I think for me, without having inside knowledge on this step, but it's a positive, is this certificate of non-residency tells you that on record, you are non-resident per SARS. So when the system looks at this common reporting standard information coming through, or an auditor looks at you, why have you not declared worldwide income? It says, but this guy's non-resident on record. And I guess then you can kind of move on to the next one. So I do understand why that step is there. And it makes sense from a system perspective that you clearly classify as resident or non-resident.
Yes, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So how would I, for instance, I moved overseas 5 years ago. How would I become aware of my need for this thing? Would SARS send me a letter to say, listen, we caught you out, you haven't declared your returns? Or is it something that they just send you, listen, you've been selected for verification, we pick up that you've got R1 million coming in, but you haven't declared it? How would I, as somebody that's living overseas, become aware that I actually need to have one of these letters?
Well, under how it practically plays out is quite dangerous, because how it practically plays out is SARS will not send you a letter. They will simply raise an additional assessment or an estimated assessment.
Yeah.
And if you don't respond to that estimated assessment within a certain period of time, that thing becomes final. And obviously, our Supreme Court of Appeal has said that if you don't adhere to the timelines as a taxpayer, that thing is final, no matter how wrong it is. So we kind of, as a firm, advocate that you should not have a fingers crossed approach. You should realize that technology is running.
Yes.
You are on that piece of technology, and it's of no service for you to say, how will they catch me or how will they know me? I mean, it's exactly the same as has happened to so many South Africans that went abroad, got a second passport, never informed Home Affairs, years later want to renew their South African passport, and then they found out they've lost their citizenship because they've got a second passport, you know. Yes. If you're a South African abroad, if you've got a client abroad, don't have a fingers crossed approach, you know, go find out what that status is. We as a firm, yeah, Heinrich, we've kind of got active steps in place, and just something that will speak to all your audience is we do this quite a detailed CIPC and SARS check, and you'll be surprised how many people have got CIPC stuff that's not sorted out in the past, or CIPC where an entity is deregistered, but at SARS it's still active. There's no way that you can tell me those two systems talk to one another.
Yes.
And then when you want to go through that SARS non-residency process or financial immigration process, or whatever your choice of word is, that's when all of those things come out. And we've got guys that says, but we paid our accountant to deregister this company. We can show you the invoice, we can show you the email to say it's been deregistered, but they forgot to tell SARS. So the system never forgets. And it just builds up and builds up and builds up. And then when it untangles, that's obviously when it becomes a bit of a mess.
Yeah, so I think if you're not actively pursuing this thing to try and figure out what the status is, then somewhere down the line it's going to come back to bite you. Just I had a case now in a week of a guy who phoned me, and he said that he's got a small pension payout of about 72,000 rand. He's got to pay out. This guy's an electrician. They send the pension payout to the receiver of revenue. So I said, okay, thank you. I'll just keep all the money back. So this guy said last time he filed the return was like in 2000 because he's an electrician. He doesn't think he needs to file a return. So I said, well, obviously such things you've got to file a return because obviously there's penalties or something. Otherwise, they won't just take your money. I think that's probably the similar type of scenario that people somewhere down the line, something is going to pop up and they want to get money from a pension fund or something. And Sars says, no, first got to sort us out.
I know, and I think there's a big educational part there in what you said to the market. I mean, whether it is a small cashing out of a fund, we just very often deal with guys that approach us because the money gets taken from their bank account. It happens daily, you know, in terms of these third-party appointments. Whether it happens when you've left South Africa and you get an inheritance from a family member in South Africa and you want to move the money abroad, whether you want to sell a property one day or buy one, there's just event after event. It's just not worth running. You know, it's just get it under control and keep it under control. And it's not a big job when it's under control, but when it's now escalated to them taking that full 72,000, and now you appear out of nowhere and try to argue why that 72,000 should disappear. Nobody is happy. You know, the tax practitioner or accountant's not happy because it's not nice work. The taxpayer is not happy because it's a lot of fees they have to pay. And as you know, it's not a guaranteed outcome because there's probably penalties there and admin penalties that may or may not get waived. So it's a no-win situation.
Yeah, for sure. So what we've looked at now is just like briefly the worst case scenario if it goes wrong and what your responsibility actually is. So if we had to talk about that, what is the right steps that you have to follow if you decide that I want to up? And we were talking just now, me and Thomas, we were talking about the Netherlands, you know, what a lovely, and all the opportunities and stuff there. So if I decided that's it, I'm taking my suitcases, I'm out of here. What is the right steps to follow if I do decide I want to immigrate? Do I just get a job, get on a plane and just shoot out of here, or what must I do then?
Thomas?
Thank you. Heinrich, you know, any diligence advisor would start at the first place, which is, what is your intention? Are you coming back permanently or not? You know, if the intention is that you're going to be coming back, then what you're going to want to look at is either your resident options or perhaps a double taxation agreement to temporarily cease residency in South Africa. But what we're talking about is a different category here. These are the guys who intend to leave South Africa and they do not intend to come back, only if something changes. But in that case, you have to undergo a formal process with SARS to cease your South African tax residency. It's not as simple as ticking a box in your return, as Jerry says, crossing fingers and hoping for the best. You know, we've seen it time and time again where that was the process followed and it unravels every time. You have to make a formal declaration with SARS. You have to motivate your exit. You have to give SARS full documentation and evidence. They ultimately follow an evidence-based approach. They will verify objectively the factors that point towards your intention being permanent, even going into such granular detail as, do you still have family in South Africa? And if so, why? And how often do you return? And for what reason is that? Or where you have a gym contract between the two countries. We've even seen cases where SARS looks at which country you play more golf in, or squash or cricket. And it sounds amusing, but this is deadly serious. And these facts can put you in very hot water if it's not set up correctly or framed correctly with SARS. It could give the wrong impression. But once you've done that financial immigration, that permanent non-resident process with SARS, and it's been accepted, everything's done, then you're going to want to undergo the process of application for the non-resident confirmation letter. And that's, as Jerry had mentioned, it's a new final step though that's been introduced by SARS. It doesn't have an expiration date on it, but it does put on record formally what your initial non-resident effective date is. So from then on. And that's what we say to clients you have to follow now to fully close the chapter on your South African tax residency. We hope they don't shift the goalposts again, but as Jerry said, they are looking at expats, and we do expect the screws to be tightened further. So this is becoming critical. Now, when a client comes in with us, it depends. Was the process followed through us? Then we know what to put forward to SARS. But if not, then it goes in an entirely different direction. And everything that Jerry had said regarding compliance and the steps taken, that has to be looked at specifically.
Yes. I know that obviously I've had my feelers out in my ears and listening to what people are saying. I think a lot of people are under the impression, if they decide that I'm going to up and go, that they just do the financial immigration process through the Reserve Bank, and that's it. They think that's where it stops. But I think that's only one side of the coin. I think the other side of the coin is the receiver of revenue. You must not forget them.
Yeah. I know they've now changed it, that the only thing that the Reserve Bank wants to see to start off with is that immigration tax clearance certificate PIN. That's a thing that the Reserve Bank is waiting for. But I mean, in terms of misunderstanding in the market, when we went to Parliament on this a couple of years ago, because we surveyed the whole market, and one of the questions was, if you've not filed a return, you just stop filing returns. Based on what's your reason for just stopping? And one of the main reasons given was, no, I called SARS, and somebody at the call center told me I can stop filing a return if I go and work in the DRC or something like that. And we said, we're not saying this to aggravate SARS, but even within SARS, there's at a call center level, a very big misunderstanding in terms of those rules. And the problem, I think, for us as tax guys like yourself as well, is we know there's not just one SARS. There's the SARS that you need to get a refund out, or that don't want to pay your travel allowance refund back, and they'll audit the same thing 3 times and make huge mistakes on it and declare your objection invalid, and they can't give you reasons why. We fixed that quickly with the High Court application, by the way. They understand then suddenly they understand what to do. But then there's the other side, that SARS that wants to collect money, and they'll just go right into your bank account without notices and take the money. So there's definitely an education process that must happen around this. I think the way I explain it to people always is to say, listen, common reporting standards were reported through to SARS. So if you're a professional and you do things kind of semi-right, then just do the right thing and move on. And if you are potentially planning to, if you're working up in Africa because you want to retire in South Africa, I still think it's a great retirement place compared to some other places in the world. Might not always have the most exciting job opportunities for a youngster, but we're all kind of different. If you are planning to work outside and retire, you must be able to explain that money, and you mustn't be able to explain the money today. I think, Heinrich, you're like us, you follow case law, and all the cases that come through that taxpayers lose now, it's not because I did yesterday something wrong that today I'm in court. It is a case of 5 years ago or 8 years ago, I did something wrong, and an assessment was raised and they caught that, and now it's only case law. So you must be able to explain your wealth, your retirement, your house, your car. You must be, and that must start with your tax return and your tax status.
Yes. Yes, I fully agree. So just to maybe take one step back. So we were talking obviously about in the past the misconception that people thought just do reserve bank, financial immigration, I'm out of here, that is done. Now, obviously, there's the new requirement where they want these certificates, these confirmation letters. And I believe that there was a period of time where they were quite lenient with those letters, where they were actually issuing those letters. But then something new popped up to quite recently, where they're actually starting sending out rejection letters, where they actually reject your application to get the letter. Do you guys maybe want to expand a little bit on that? Well, what is that about? Why do they reject my application if I'm not in South Africa anymore?
So Heinrich, as a taxpayer, when you make this application, you'll see a rejection letter, and one of two things has happened. Either one, most likely your financial immigration or permanent non-resident, tax non-resident process was not correctly followed through on. Or the second scenario where, because the letter doesn't come free, SARS has asked you further audit questions, verifying your facts and information and documents, and you haven't handled that correctly. But in both cases, it means one thing. It means that factually you are not and have not been a non-resident on SARS system. But also, and very importantly, from a risk perspective, it also tells SARS that you have been regarding yourself as a non-resident in your tax returns, and that could leave you with an exposure from a SARS audit perspective, in which case you should definitely and as immediately as possible seek to correct that, go through the formal proper process to cease your residency. But in saying so, it does give you that opportunity to correct that situation and make things good again, remediation, so to speak. So it's very important. You never want to see that letter. You never want SARS to issue it to you. If you have, very quickly have a discussion with somebody who knows expat tax very well, preferably with a legal component in the firm. But if you are issued with the letter you're looking for, great. You can use that for whatever purposes you need it.
Yes. There were rumors where people said that if they move overseas, they've got a certificate that side to say that, no, I'm resident that side. I don't need to worry about anything else anymore. What is your opinion on that? Have you seen any of those certificates actually that other countries issue?
Heinrich, I see them all the time. We definitely do in our practice. And that's because many countries around the world have tax treaties in place with South Africa and treaty obligations. And these letters are valuable for South African taxpayers in other countries to prove that they're resident on the other side. It's perhaps part of the general evidence pack that you would need to prove non-residency in South Africa. But to be very clear, it speaks to only one thing, and that's that the other country sees you as a tax resident. South Africa, outside of its treaties, our residency tests don't care if you're a resident in another country. It means nothing for your status on SARS system. At best, you can perhaps use that foreign country's certificate to claim treaty benefits like temporary non-residency in South Africa, but that's not something that happens automatically. So it's great if you have that certificate, and you'll certainly need it for certain purposes in South Africa, but it doesn't itself mean that you're a non-resident. So don't make that mistake.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that answer.
If I can just answer that also in a different way. You through the years see a lot of taxpayers that horribly get ripped off by the tax consultants. So we've had cases of people that say, listen, we're very sure our taxes are fully up to date, fully compliant, fully disclosed. And we then say, well, we want to do a diagnostic. We want to see that ourselves. You know, we don't just assume stuff. And then we go look in those returns, and we see that all that taxpayer's practitioner did is file zero returns for the past 8 years, put in zeros. And you will have a highly upset taxpayer then, because I will show you the emails of where they send in the rental income and the interest income details. They'll even show you the invoice for 4.5 or 5 or 6,000 Rand, which they made the guy pay, because this is now a good result that you've got no tax to pay, but they literally just filed in zero returns. And what they then would do is they will send to the taxpayer a tax clearance certificate to prove that your taxes are up to date. Because you know, if you just file 0 returns and you ask for a clearance certificate, you'll get it. It doesn't mean your taxes were done correctly. It just means that your taxes are up to date.
Yes.
And it's the same with the residency certificate. The residency certificate just says, we under UK law treat you as resident for tax purposes. Guess what? Under South African law, we also treat you as a resident for tax purposes. And then you have to go through that tiebreaker clause to determine where you are resident. But that certificate in itself means absolutely nothing. It's just a part to prove that you can claim residency in another country. And in our practice, and this is obviously, every case is different, we do not like that residency certificate route as much as what we like the SARS immigration Reserve Bank process. And the reason why we prefer the SARS immigration process with the Reserve Bank is because that process is once off.
Yeah.
If you do the residency certificate route, that certificate that you've mentioned, you need it every single year. And in certain places like the UAE, it costs a lot of money to do. And what do you do if you've got it for 4 years, but for 2 years you don't? Are you then in effect agreeing for those 2 years that you were resident? So it's a far cleaner and cheaper and more permanent route to follow the full immigration route and get the tax non-residency certificate issued without an expiry date, then get issued a foreign residency certificate, which is always only applicable for a specific tax year in the foreign country.
Great, yeah, that definitely makes sense. So if I'm busy looking at this video now, let's say for instance, I immigrated out of South Africa 5 years ago. Back then, at the time, my tax consultant did all the returns, submitted everything fine. Is there anything that I should go back now to maybe get you guys involved and say, listen, just have a double check for me, make sure? How do I actually contact you guys? And how can you help me as somebody that's sitting overseas at the moment? And all of a sudden I realized, shucks, I haven't got one of these certificates. What do I do now? Or one of those letters. What is that process?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very grateful if you could just share our details and Thomas's details. He's better with these things than me, and people can drop him a mail. We just want to do a quick diagnostic. I think that is really something that we can just check that the past is right. And if the past is right, we're too busy to look for work. If the past is right, we'll tell you, this is perfectly done. Let's move forward. Let's just perhaps get just that last step for you. The other part, I think, where we work a lot with other advisors is where you've got a family or a high net worth family starting to migrate overseas, or they at least want to move their money out so long before they want to physically move themselves out. You know, we love that roadmap. We love that planning. You know, if you, for example, if you want to go to the US, it's not always a good idea to go straight to the US. We've got many clients that first go to Israel for 6 months before they go to the US. Go to Mauritius a bit before you go to the UK. We need to have that discussion. So we love being kind of part of that phase of people's lives, and it's important part and it's interesting work, and we work with other advisors on that. So if you'd be kind enough to share that details, anything that's interesting is what keeps the team alive.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm definitely going to share the details. Obviously, for the guys basically watching, the website is taxconsulting.co.za. I'm going to share the details of Thomas on the video as well in the description of the video. And I think so I think in short that it is something new. It is something that people must take serious. They don't put this thing on the shelf and think it's just going to go away. Don't use the fingers crossed approach, because the SARS is going to catch you out. And that is, like I said, once again, why I've got these guys to come and talk on the YouTube channel, so we can educate you guys a little bit about tax as well, just to see what needs to happen. Yeah, and then just thank you guys once again for your time. I really appreciate every second that I can spend with you guys, and just the amount of knowledge that you guys are willing to share with the people out there as well. yeah, I know that there's people that's going to be greatly helped by this video today. Yeah, any last words from you guys? Jerry, Thomas?
Heinrich, thank you for what you do for the industry. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much for having us, Heinrich. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, then yeah, keep an eye out for the next video. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. And we'll catch you guys on the next video. Thanks.